Today's episode of the Kansas Dynasty is going to be a little bit different as we go through Conference Championship weekend, and then we will cover some of the end-of-year events, including the Heisman Trophy winner, all the major awards and All-Americans, and most importantly, the reveal of the 12-team college football playoff. And right now, our Kansas Jayhawks are right on the edge. We are the last team in the playoff as an at-large team. Obviously, we don't have a conference championship game to help prove ourselves, and we're probably going to need some help across the country if we want to ensure an at-large bid. No matter what happens, whether we get in or not, it's hard not to be proud of this young team. Obviously, a group led by underclassmen. Not many key seniors on the roster, so you would have expected for there to be more of a learning curve, but that really was not the case. Our team had a very successful year, 9-3, 7-2 in conference, with our only losses coming against Florida, Arizona, and Kansas State, arguably the three best teams on the schedule, which may pose the question of if our team is set up to face off against a playoff caliber team. But I think we've got what it takes to potentially surprise some people. We were the number 9 seed in year number 1 and made it all the way to the national championship game. So I certainly would not want to rule out the idea of a Cinderella run, even if it would be even less likely with this year's team. Of course, the Kansas State game I go back to is the fascinating one for a couple of reasons. For one thing, you can make the argument we should have won with that horrible call on the 4th down Mario Maddox touchdown. If they got that call right, we would have gotten an extra 7 points in a 6-point loss. However, it is certainly strange that at least as of right now, we're ranked ahead of Kansas State, even though they have a better record and they beat us. But I'm not complaining. This is what our team's stats look like here at the end of the season. It really feels like we have a true identity on the offensive side of the ball, leaning with the run game between Clyde Poole and then especially the two freshman running backs, Ty Lord and Cornell Teamer. Of course, out wide, we would not have Mario Maddox available for the playoffs with his pectoral injury that he suffered a couple games ago against Iowa State. The young guys stepped up against TCU. Amani Law played well. Rajon Jones played well. Isaiah Lamore did as well, but we would still need more. The offensive line would need to be a little more consistent, and obviously the defense has been quite up and down this year, but there were a lot of positives. Travion Ford was one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Devin Murphy really broke onto the scene. And as we look at how young this team is again, our starting quarterback is a true sophomore. Our top 2 running backs are true freshmen. Our top 2 wide receivers are true freshmen. Our second leading sack getter is a true freshman. Our number 1 outside corner is a true freshman. You get the point. We have one of the youngest teams in the country, and it would certainly be interesting to see them, in a high-stakes playoff game, especially considering pretty much all of the contributors from seasons 1 and 2, with the exception of a few guys, are no longer with the program. So again, we are currently the last team in, and if the season were to end right now, we would play against Clemson at Death Valley in the first round, a rematch of our non-conference game last year. However, our fate is not in our own hands because we're going to need some help. Essentially, what we don't want is for a bid-stealing team. So essentially, if somebody like Miami or UCF, who is currently slated to win their conference championship game, let's say they lose the conference title game, they're still going to make the playoff anyway. However, the team who wins that conference is going to join them. They would be replacing us since we are the last team in. So basically, we need UCF to defeat Arizona State. Now, if Arizona State wins, I'm not sure they would be the 5th conference champion to make it into the playoff. But for our perspective, it doesn't really matter because some other conference champion would be coming in. UCF obviously would move to an at-large spot where they would get the stop. Same thing with Miami and Stanford. We need Miami to win that game because we don't want Stanford to win, because that would mean that Stanford would jump into the 12-team playoff. Miami's not going anywhere. They would replace us. I don't love relying on Mario Cristobal to win a big game late in the year, but unfortunately we don't have a choice. I do want to keep an eye on the Notre Dame-Michigan game, though. Say one of Miami or UCF does lose, we can hold out some hope that maybe Michigan beats Notre Dame, preferably by a lot. Notre Dame drops a few spots in the rankings, maybe even below us. As for the Heisman race, Xavier Jordan of USC currently in the lead. DJ Lagway and Zion Turner also in the list. Those are the only two guys of the top 5 who will be playing in Conference Championship weekend, as Lagway and his Florida Gators will face off against the Alabama Crimson Tide, in which should be an interesting one. Alabama historically loses big games themselves in this series, but Florida has struggled. They've lost a couple of games in a row, so it will be fascinating to watch. And we'll go through the Conference Championship games in just a moment to figure out what our fate looks like. But first, I do briefly want to go over recruiting, and I also want to go over the fact that we have been offered a contract extension, which we will be gladly accepting. Puma Whitlock is not going anywhere. We're building a great thing right now at the University of Kansas, and it's easy to forget how bad this team and this program has been in the years before us. Yes, they were pretty good in 2023, made a bowl game in 2022, but there was no success prior to that. And now we have turned Kansas into a regular playoff-ish contender with some very strong recruiting classes over the last couple of years. Obviously, the recruiting trail has certainly slowed down quite a bit. We've still got a few guys who we are going after in pretty tight races, but we're not putting hours into everyone, particularly these 3 stars, because I'm not entirely sure if I want some of these guys on scholarship over the other guys we have on our roster. There are a couple of players on the board who are down to 3 schools whose recruitments will be ending in about 3 minutes. Also, for what it's worth, we currently have the 5th ranked recruiting class in the country, which is exactly where we finished last year. Coming into this season, I did not expect the top 5 spot, given that, we're not coming off a playoff appearance, and that number could still change, but still quite impressive. So now it is time to simulate the week, the moment of truth, Conference Championship weekend. Stanford and Miami, and then Arizona State and UCF are the 2 that are most important for us. We need Miami and UCF to win those games, so nobody else can join the playoff and take our spot. If one of Miami or UCF does lose, I think the easiest avenue for us to sneak back in would be Notre Dame losing, particularly Notre Dame getting blown out, so we can jump past ahead of them. But I think with all the scenarios, it really is a 50-50 shot of whether we get in or not, as we have some good news on the recruiting trail. Rasheem Diggs, the talented 6'3" receiver from Chapman High School in Inman, South Carolina, has committed to us. Obviously, we haven't put a ton of focus on offensive skill position players. This is our first pass catcher at the cycle, but a pretty good one. I'm not entirely sure what his role is going to be next year with all of our receivers scheduled to come back, but he's a talented player who gives us a lot of what we don't have in terms of size and physicality on the outside. Mike Jefferson from Glenbard East High School is coming as well. We lost on the other center we were going after, Kion Farrow, who is going to Wisconsin, but we do land Jefferson. We've got plenty of interior offensive linemen, though, dating back to the last couple of years, but it's nice to add another guy into the room. So Diggs and Jefferson will be joining the program. The other guys here are continuing to narrow their list down. Cornerback Jaron McGlynn is down to 3. Unfortunately, we're in 2nd. It seems like North Carolina is putting a lot into him. And then some of the guys who we just recently put on the board, they are down to 5. So let's now talk about these conference championship games. These are the matchups that essentially determine our fate in the playoff, or at least like the power conference matchups. Maybe not this game, per se. Liberty against Louisiana Tech. Liberty looking for its 2nd consecutive Conference USA title, and they would get it. Now, obviously, the one to win in this series for them would have been Season 1, where had they won that game, they would have made the playoff, and obviously they did not. But they have won the conference 2 years in a row. Granted, this year, they only went 6-6 in the regular season. Kind of a quiet game from the senior quarterback Ryan Berger, but they ran it well. Victor Venn, the talented running back, leads the way. Zachary Card, the standout transfer from Oregon State, playing well too. Blake Baker had a good game for Louisiana Tech, but it was not enough. Into the Sun Belt, Coastal Carolina has gotten better and better throughout this series. They are facing off against the University of Louisiana Lafayette, and the Chants would take care of business. Sophomore quarterback Noah Easy, the lefty, made it look easy. Coastal Carolina now 11-2. They win 21-31, playing really well in the 2nd and 3rd quarters. Easy with 2 scores. He also led the team in rushing. Granted, he wasn't all that efficient in doing so. As for UL Lafayette, Dwayne Winfield picked off 4 times. Yeah, that's not going to cut it. Into the Mountain West now. Nevada faces off against New Mexico. Nevada's got some NFL caliber prospects on their roster, most notably their running back, Ashton Hayes, who ended up getting injured later in this game. But that would not stop the Wolfpack from taking this one over the New Mexico Lobos to win the Mountain West 42-17. They do so by blowout fashion. AJ Blanco, the senior quarterback, was phenomenal. 4 touchdowns, completed nearly 80% of his passes. 4 different receivers caught scores, including Nate Burleson II. As we get to the Pac-12 championship game, Boise State versus Washington State, the first conference title game of the new look Pac-12. Remember, there was not a conference championship last year. Well, this year it will go to the Boise State Broncos in a pretty close game, winning at 45-39 with a strong performance from senior quarterback Maddox Madsen. There is a scenario for Boise State to make the playoff. It would take a whole lot, but if both UMass and UCF lose, it's possible that Boise State would be the 5th highest ranked conference champion, and thus they would get a spot. That's asking for a lot, but hey, you never know. John Mateer threw for 5 touchdowns, so the 2 quarterbacks combined for 9 scores through the air. And now we get to the big ones. UMass undefeated in their first season of MAC conference play. With a win here, they will be the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion and go to the playoff. Well, they lost. And not only that, but they got slaughtered by the Buffalo Bulls. Don't tell a Falcons fan, because the final score was 28-3. So UMass gets absolutely pummeled. Playoff is now out the window for them, since they're not a conference champion and they don't really have much of an argument now as an at-large team. This certainly hurts what was a great year for the Minutemen. First season in the MAC, they go undefeated in conference play, but they lay an egg right at the end. So now that opens the door for the winner of this game between Tulsa and Charlotte in the American Conference. The winner of this game is going to the college football playoff. It ended up being competitive early, but Charlotte would run away with it in the 4th quarter. And the 49ers, at this point, are now guaranteed to be a top 5 ranked conference champion. They may end up in the top 4, which would give them a first-round bye. 49-21 your final. It was tied at 14 going into the 4th, and then Charlotte turned on the waterworks. 35 4th-quarter points for the 49ers, who, again, will be at least one of our Group 5 representatives in the playoff. Maybe we end up with more. If, say, Arizona State wins the Big 12, that would open the door for someone like Boise State. Let's now look at the Power 4 games. Alabama and Florida in the SEC is probably the only one that does not have an effect on Kansas. The winner of this game is in. The loser is out. Remember, we played Florida earlier in the year. They scored over 50 points, but they have forgotten how to play offense over the last couple of weeks. Now, lucky for them, Alabama also forgot. Florida will hang on to win it 17-10. So in typical Alabama fashion, as has been the case since season 1, they start the year off slowly. Then they start to play well. They perform better. They go to the SEC Championship, and they do this. Eli Holstein, 43% completion percentage. Yikes. Now, I will give Alabama credit on the defensive side of the ball because DJ Lagway was not much better. Florida was the last team to lose a game this year. They were 10-0, but now they are really struggling, and they might not even get a bye. Charlotte might be ranked ahead of them. Now into the Big Ten, Notre Dame and Michigan. The Fighting Irish in their first year in the conference looking to win the conference. I think Notre Dame losing would benefit us in the case that one of Miami or UCF loses. The Irish dropping below us would be nice, but I don't think that's going to happen because Notre Dame ends up winning this game. They win the Big Ten. They are back in the playoff, and they will get an automatic first-round bye. They win it 45-28, so the number 1 ranked Michigan Wolverines go down to the Irish. Michigan is a lock for the playoffs still. They are 11-2. They will probably host a first-round game, but obviously this is a big blow for them. I'm sure they would have rather had the first-round bye. Jay Pitts, the redshirt freshman, looks like the real deal. I'm excited to see him in action in the second round of the playoff, joined by Jeremiah Love and friends. 2 more games. Here are the big ones. UCF and Arizona State in the Big 12 title game. We need UCF to win. We cannot have Arizona State win this game. In typical Big 12 fashion, there was a lot of offense, a lot of scoring. But UCF does us a solid, and they win this game 50-42. Both of these teams have really strong defenses for Big 12 standards, and, well, they just forgot how to play defense today. Arizona State actually led kind of convincingly at half. UCF with a big second half comeback to win the conference title. UCF is now looking at a first-round bye, maybe the number 1 overall seed. Ja'Cory Brown is better than just about every quarterback in the playoff field, but his sophomore receiver, Kylan Fox, really stole the show. 7 catches for $190 and 4 scores to go with a 75-yard rushing touchdown. Goodness. 1 game down, 1 to go. We still need some help here in the ACC title game between Miami and Stanford. Will Mario Cristobal do us a solid and win a big game? This one, like the Big 12 title, ended up being quite close. But the Miami Hurricanes would survive. 38-28, they defeat Stanford. So Miami has a case to be the number 1 overall seed. They are back in the playoff. But more importantly for us, the scenario that we needed to happen has happened. There will be no bid stealers. Miami wins their conference title. UCF wins theirs as well. So if the previous rankings hold to form, we are probably going to the playoff. I'm not going to put it past this game, though, to make some changes, especially considering the thought of somebody like Kansas State moving ahead of us. Kansas State had a better record than us. They beat us as well. So I still wouldn't be surprised to see that switch. But the scenario we needed to happen during conference championship weekend went our way. There will be no bid stealers as Miami and UCF take care of business. Let's take a look at the players of the week before we reveal the playoff. Obviously, Kylan Fox wins it. He is joined by Dante Balfour with 3 interceptions for Charlotte. And then in the Big 12, it is Fox joined by UCF linebacker Andrew Harris. Alrighty, are we ready for the moment of truth? Let's reveal the 12-team college football playoff. We're going to go through the awards and the bowls and all that in just a little bit. But first, it is time to reveal the 12 teams who are going to the playoff. It will not be this week, though. We have to do one more little bit of simulating. So I'm going to make you guys wait another minute. There is no recruiting in this week, so there isn't much to talk about there. However, we do lose out on cornerback Jaron McGlynn, who's going to the University of North Carolina. So it sucks we lost out on him. I thought he was a good player. Reminds me a lot of Caleb Purdy as a primary slot corner. That's a good get for the Tar Heels. So even though there was no recruiting this week and we couldn't put points into anyone, we still end up losing this battle, which is a little bit disappointing. But we've got some other good defensive backs in the pipeline and in this year's recruiting class, so I think we'll survive. All right, now it is time for the moment of truth. Our 12-team bracket is here. It is fully blanked, though. But now it is time to reveal the teams who are going to the playoff. Let's start at the number 1 overall seed, the champions of the ACC, the Miami Hurricanes. They defeat Stanford. They get this spot. Zion Turner, the transfer from Jacksonville State, leading the way. The number 2 seed, the UCF Knights, the champions of the Big 12. I have talked glowingly about how good I think this team is. Ja'Cory Brown, better than just about any quarterback in the country. Notre Dame, the champions of the Big 10, end up as the number 3 seed. Freshman quarterback Jay Pitts has captivated the minds of many, and the Charlotte 49ers end up with a first-round bye over Florida, which is a big surprise. Florida only lost 2 games. You would think that record in the SEC gets you a bye, but it does not. They end up as the number 12 seed. So now it's time for the good stuff. Who will be our at-large teams? We've got 7 spots open. Maryland, the number 5 seed. They will host Florida. MJ Moores and the Terps going 11-2 after a good season last year. They get over the hump. The number 6 seed is the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan won the national title in year 1. Fell a little bit short last year. It's going to be a challenge here without their star running back Darius Taylor, who's been hurt for roughly half the season. Clemson, the number 7 seed. Like Michigan, they're on a revenge tour. They were the number 1 overall seed last year, undefeated, but lost in the Final Four to Oregon. The number 8 seed, USC, they were one and done in last year's playoff with freshman quarterback Sam Onatulu. They're hoping for a little more luck. Number 9, who will play against USC? It's the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma finally gets over the hump. Jackson Arnold with a really strong season helping lead them to the spot. 2 more to go. The 10th seed will be the University of Oregon. So a rematch of last year's Final Four game between Oregon and Clemson. With that, there's 1 spot remaining. No surprise that we have not been picked yet. If we were going to make the playoff, it was always going to be as the 11th seed. But now it's time for the moment of truth. Kansas is going back to the playoff! We sneak in as the 11th seed. The final at-large bid in the college football playoff, and we are headed to the Big House to face off against Michigan. As I mentioned earlier, I think this team is capable of going on a Cinderella run like we saw in year number 1, where we won 3 playoff games, making it to the national title, and losing against Michigan. So this is our opportunity at revenge. We have not gotten our chance to play against Michigan since the title game 2 seasons ago. Now, it is worth noting that most of our roster from season 1 is gone. Most of their roster from season 1 is gone as well. Guys like Alex Orji, Donovan Edwards, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, etc. All in the NFL. So both teams look very, very different, but it should lead to a really fun matchup. We get the spot over Kansas State, and I would imagine that us getting it over the Wildcats is going to be certainly a point of discussion within college football circles for the next year. Kansas State had a better record than us. They beat us as well, but the game gave us the spot anyway. Clearly they felt bad because of the Mario Maddox touchdown call, and this is their way of paying us back. If this is the apology, I think it's a pretty good one. I accept it. I would enjoy seeing the Kansas State tears from this decision by the College Football Playoff Committee. Hi, I'll have 1 order of copium, please. I would understand the reaction because they did kind of get screwed out at the spot, but hey, I am not complaining whatsoever. Let's talk about some of these awards now. We'll start with the Heisman Trophy winner, and ultimately our winner is Xavier Jordan out of Michigan, the first receiver and the first non-quarterback since Devontae Smith to take home the Heisman, and deservedly so. 65 catches, over 1,300 yards, and 24 touchdowns. He scored like 40% of the time he got the ball. You can make the argument that he didn't touch the ball enough compared to some of these other quarterbacks, but he was so effective as a receiver, it's hard to argue with it. Now, interestingly, Zion Turner climbs all the way up to 2nd. Zion was never really on the Heisman list up until right at the end of the year. I think it's fair that he's in the top 5. I thought he had a fantastic season, transferring from Jacksonville State, leading Miami to the number 1 seed. Ja'Cory Brown was not on the list for most of the year, but I like that he is here. He certainly deserves it. DJ Lagway and Max Brown take the 4 and 5 spots. They were both absolutely fantastic as well. So I don't think there's anybody of that top 5 who really doesn't deserve to be there. Let's talk about some of the other awards. We've got some winners, or really one winner taking home multiple awards. Travion Ford, Best Defensive Player. I didn't think he was going to win this one. He was in the running for most of the year, but it looks like he's taken it right at the end, which is pretty dope. Travion Ford also wins the Best Defensive End Award. Very well deserved. 23 TFLs, 12 sacks, and he wins the Lombardi Award. What a season for Travion Ford. The development that he had this year was so much fun. So, looking at the other awards, we'll start with the Player of the Year. I think this is just an extension of the Heisman because the top 5 is the exact same order. So, as we look at the rest of the list, I'm a little surprised Tyler Brown fell all the way to 7th. But the big complaint I have is, where is Dante Moore? Dante had similar amount of yards and touchdowns as everybody else, but he only threw 1 interception. What am I missing? Maddox, Madsen, and Eli Holstein were not better. Zion Turner ends up winning the top quarterback. Hard to argue with that. But where on God's green earth is Dante Moore? And how is Sam Onatulu in 10th? He threw for 48 touchdowns this year. Travion Ford wins the Best Defensive Player. I'm surprised he took it over the Purdue duo, especially C.J. Madden, who finished the year with, I think, 19 and a half sacks. I don't remember the number, but it was large, put it that way. Nonetheless, cool to see. Best Defensive Back, the freshman Brendan Hilleman of Miami, who has 4 of the top 5 and 5 of the top 8. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this. Last year, Clemson had their entire secondary on the list. in year one, us and Oregon were the entire top 10. We do have some names here. Caleb Purdy in 6th, Devontae Maxson in 7th, and Brian Dilworth in 12th. It's ironic because our secondary was our weakness this year, but all three of those guys individually were quite solid. I don't think Dilworth should be in the top 12, though. He allowed a few too many big plays. Dante Dowdell wins the best running back. No major surprise. I am a little surprised to see Ty Lord on the list in 6th. I didn't think he would have had the yards to get here, but I guess it was because he was so efficient. So shout out to Ty Lord, the 6th best running back in the nation. I could not have seen that coming at all going into the year as Xavier Jordan wins the top receiver. My question is, how is Tyler Brown in 9th? He was in the Heisman race for most of the year. That does not make much sense. Travion Ford wins the Lombardi, as we mentioned earlier, one of his 3 awards that he takes home during this cycle. The Unitas Golden Arm ends up being Zion Turner. At first, I was surprised to see all seniors, but it literally is an award for senior quarterbacks only. Dante Moore in 12th is ridiculous. Why do we keep giving this guy bulletin board material to try to make another title run? Travion Ford wins the best defensive end, his 3rd award. Caden Green, best interior offensive lineman, with James Livingston in 4th, deservedly so. The decision to move him inside from tackle to guard has been a really good one. Riley Williams, top tight end, and look who's at number 6, Isaiah Lamore, the only underclassman on the list. Isaiah Lamore had a good season. I'm surprised he made it into the top 10, but he did play really well for us. He had some big grabs. The Broyles Award goes to the UCF offensive coordinator. Best linebacker is Malik Bryant at the University of Miami. A lot of Miami defensive players high on every list. I'm excited to see their defense in action. We've been giving their offense all the credit, but they are a great defensive team. Ayapani Loluulu wins the Best Center Award. There's your Groza winner. Here's your Best Punter. We do not have anybody on the special teams list. Hopefully by the time he's a senior, we get Anthony Escalante in the Groza Award list. That would be pretty cool, given where he started as a freshman. Let's talk All-Americans now. I noticed that on the first team, there was only one player who would have been recruited after the start of this series. So basically only one underclassman in the entire country. And it's Isaiah Lamore. That is so random. Huh. I think Isaiah Lamore had a pretty good season. First team All-American good? I don't think I would go that far. But I mean, I'm not complaining. He had a good season for us, I suppose. That's pretty awesome. Max Brown is the first team quarterback, interestingly, even though he finished in 5th place for the Heisman. No major other surprises on the offensive side of the ball. Dante Dowdell, obviously. Contravian Wisner's an interesting one, though, with Texas. The receivers kind of as expected. The offensive line has all the big names. I don't like how this game does the All-Americans because the quarterback and the skill position players are all about production, but then defense and offensive line is only about overall rating. Like, where is Travion Ford, for instance? As for the second team, again, there was only one underclassman in the entire country, and it's Ty Lord. This is so random. Ty Lord, as a true freshman, all NCAA second team. I'm not sure if he deserves it. He had less than 100 touches this year, I think, not counting kick returns. Still pretty dope, though, as Dekias Brinkley makes it as well. And again, here's my problem with the All-American list. How does Dekias Brinkley make it, but not Travion Ford? It has to be because of overall rating. Every single player on the freshman team is a redshirt freshman with the exception of 2 guys. Ty Lord and Cornell Teamer, our running back duo. I feel like this game is kind of obsessed with our team. They handed us the playoff spot that we probably shouldn't have gotten. Isaiah Lamore gets all NCAA first team. Ty Lord on the second team. Lord and Teamer are the only non-redshirt freshmen to make the all-freshman team. Having that extra offseason of development is a really big deal, to be fair. I mean, clearly everybody here other than Lord and Teamer took advantage. Still, I'm surprised to see these 2 guys here. They both had really good seasons, so it's hard to argue with it. They both averaged over 7 yards per carry. Granted, much of that came off of really big runs. But again, all of it is ratings-based, because as we look at the defensive side of the ball, Cedric Freeman of Mississippi State had 3.5 sacks. Oscar Linetti of Michigan had half a sack. Yet Devin Murphy had 7 in just 9 games. How would he not get the spot? As for the all Big 12 first team on the offensive side of the ball, we've got Ty Lord, Isaiah Lamore, and James Livingston. Livingston, I can agree with. The other two guys, I think we're reaching a little bit, but again, I'm not complaining. Dekias Brinkley makes it. You already know how I feel about that. That should be Travion Ford's spot. And then nobody else gets it on defense. As for the second team, I was pleasantly surprised to see Clyde Poole make it. And, you know, given what he has provided us in the run game, along with being a solid passer, I guess it's hard to argue with it. How many other quarterbacks in the conference, other than Ja'Cory Brown, are better than Clyde Poole? Cornell Teamer makes the second team, along with Samuel Impemba and Taylor Davis. No Travion Ford, though. He wins the Lombardi, he wins the best defensive end, and he wins the best defensive player. Yet, he doesn't even make all-conference. This game is funny. Let's take a look at the bowl matchups. Obviously, I wanted a playoff spot, but if we were to miss out, I was hoping for the Pop-Tart Bowl. It ends up being Arizona State against NC State. I'll prefer a first-round matchup in the Big House, though. That sounds pretty good. And then here are the rest of the bowl matchups, which I guess we will probably go over a lot of them in the next episode. Before we wrap up, we've got one more thing to go through, and that is National Signing Day. So this is where recruitments can sign their commitments to our school, and we get to see all of their development traits as well. So luckily, nobody who originally committed to us flipped elsewhere. Unfortunately, nobody flipped to us either. We're going to take Jaron McGlynn off. He has star development. It looks like we missed out. Now, I will point out that players can actually still flip. We saw it with Reed Sharp last year. He flipped to Minnesota at the start of the offseason and then flipped back to us. So you never know. But these players are all like 99% committed. Let's look at the depth traits, shall we? Jaden Adai only has normal. That's a little bit unfortunate. Kyrie Brower, though, has star. He is going to be a monster. Someone who I think could make an early impact and is going to be a stud down the line. And the same can be said for Leon Ibrahim. I think he's a little better than the other linebackers we got, even though he's ranked lower. Cornell Abreu only has star, and he's going to have some high expectations to fill, set, of course, by his stepbrother this season, Ty Lord. Cordell Hurley has star. There's another one. Dylan Countess only has normal. I figured that would be the case because he's listed as a bust, but that one disappoints me because I think he might be the most unique prospect on the entire board. I'm still excited about his development, though. Kiki Hall has normal. Apparently, we're only getting either normal or star until now. Frank Story has impact. Carl Willingham, the quarterback, has star. So another very talented young quarterback enters the room. Clyde Poole better watch out because we have Carl Willingham with star, DeAndre Rainbolt, Kerry Chosen, and Sean Pollard all also have star development. Nicholas Scotland Williamson has star. I'm in love with his skill set as well. That's great news. The running back room is super deep, but I want to find a way to get him on the field next year. Sam Banovich has normal, and Afa G has elite. Let's go. We finally get another elite. We did not get one at all last year. Afa G has a chance to be a game wrecker for us. 5-star, good enough to play right away, and clearly he has like NFL first-round pick type of upside. I am excited to get him onto campus. Josh Metz has impact. Bo Muse has impact. Taylor Kotsivides has normal, as does Markel Jocelyn. And look at this, another elite with Greg Von Oelhoffen. Another guy who I think has a chance to be really, really good for us. Over the first 2 seasons of this series, we only had one elite player, that being Seth Jennings, as Diggs and Jefferson both have normal. So we add 2 more elite players, both on the defensive line, like Seth Jennings, interestingly enough. But as you can see there, again, nobody has flipped to our school. But still, I'm happy that nobody left. And for now, we get to keep intact our recruiting class. And more importantly from today's episode is that we are in the college football playoff. Next time around, we will watch the first round matchups. Got some good games there. I'm excited about Florida and Miami. Those were the 2 teams I was deciding between for our non-conference schedule this year. Obviously, I picked Florida, but I think Maryland's really fun as well. Oklahoma versus USC, the Lincoln Riley Bowl, and I'm excited to see Sam Onatulu in action. Oregon versus Clemson, rematch of the Final Four last year. That's going to be fascinating. And then obviously our game with Michigan, a rematch from the Season 1 National Championship game. We were unable to meet Michigan that time, but we will get our chance for revenge, but with an entirely new football team. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Next time around, again, will be the first round of the playoff, which will be premiered sometime over the weekend. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out. Rock Chalk.